What if I told you that everything you believe, your morals, your purpose, your very sense of right and wrong, is built on a lie? Not because it's false in the traditional sense, but because the very foundation it stands on has crumbled beneath your feet, and you didn't even notice. Imagine waking up in a world where the sun still rises, the streets are still busy, but something is missing. Not an object, not a person, but something deeper, something invisible, yet essential. Meaning. This isn't science fiction. It's not even philosophy in the abstract. It's the world we live in. In 1882, German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche uttered three words that sent shockwaves through time. God is dead. But this wasn't a celebration. It wasn't an atheist victory cry. It was a funeral dirge, a scream in the dark. Nietzsche wasn't trying to destroy religion. He was mourning its death and warning us about what comes next. Because when God dies, so does everything built on him. Morality, purpose, hope, meaning. We are left staring into an abyss, untethered, with no guiding force, no divine justice, no eternal truth. And the scariest part, we did it to ourselves. Through rationalism, through modernity, through science and skepticism, we dismantled the idea of God, not with violence, but with intellect. We killed God, and Nietzsche knew that when the foundation cracks, the entire structure collapses. So here's the question that haunts us to this day. If God is dead, what remains? And more terrifyingly, are you ready to live in a world where nothing means anything unless you create it yourself? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, your understanding of morality, purpose, and the human condition will never be the same again. Picture a dim, candlelit study in 19th century Germany. Ink stains cover the desk. Dust floats silently through the cold air. Outside, the world is roaring. Factories blaze, trains thunder, and science begins tearing holes in ancient myths. And at the center of it all sits a man, Friedrich Nietzsche. His pen trembles as he writes the words that will haunt human history. God is dead. Why would a philosopher, raised in a religious household, educated in theology, declare something so radical? To understand Nietzsche, we must step into his world, a world on the brink of existential collapse. The late 1800s in Europe were a time of violent transformation. Darwin's theory of evolution had decentered humanity from the top of creation. The Industrial Revolution was turning human life into a mechanical routine. And science, for the first time, offered explanations that didn't require God. But Nietzsche didn't celebrate the shift. He saw the cracks beneath the surface. For centuries, religion was more than just belief. It was structure. It told people what was right, what was wrong, what was sacred, and what was sin. It gave life a narrative, a reason, a hope. Without God, Nietzsche saw something chilling. The structure wouldn't just wobble, it would fall. If people stopped believing in God, they wouldn't just stop going to church. They'd lose morality, purpose, identity. But here's the deeper pain Nietzsche felt. He wasn't saying God never existed. He was saying we have killed him, not by violence, but by growing out of belief, by evolving past the need for him without knowing what comes next. He compared it to a child learning that Santa Claus isn't real. That feeling of betrayal, of abandonment, multiplied by 1,000. The sacred truths weren't just lies. They were lifelines now severed. Nietzsche was not a destroyer of meaning. He was a prophet, crying out in warning as society sleepwalked toward an abyss. He feared a future where people, stripped of divine purpose, would spiral into nihilism, filling the void with money, pleasure, politics, power, anything to escape the terror of meaninglessness. He didn't hate religion, he grieved its death. And as he stared at those three words on the page, God is dead, he knew he had not sparked a revolution. He had written an obituary. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a vast abyss. You lean forward, expecting to see something. Ground, stars, light, anything. But there's nothing, just darkness, just emptiness. Now imagine that this abyss isn't outside you, but within. For centuries, religion wasn't just a belief system. It was a psychological safety net. It gave us direction. It gave us comfort. It told us who we were, what mattered, and what came next. But when Nietzsche declared God is dead, he wasn't simply attacking religion. He was pointing to the collapse of this mental scaffolding. What happens to the human psyche when its deepest answers disappear? What happens when justice, morality, and meaning vanish overnight? Today, psychologists call it an existential crisis. Nietzsche felt it long before it had a name. When people lose belief in a higher order, they don't become free in the way we like to imagine. Instead, they feel untethered, adrift in a universe with no compass. Sure, at first it might seem liberating. No more divine judgment, no rules, pure freedom. But without direction, freedom becomes a prison, like floating in space with no gravity to hold you, no path to follow, no home to return to. And here's the terrifying part Nietzsche saw. Most people aren't ready for that kind of freedom. Without God, there is no ultimate right or wrong. Without a cosmic plan, there is no reason for suffering. Without eternity, life becomes a fleeting flash, with no guarantee it meant anything. You might replace God with pleasure, politics, or possessions. But none of them satisfy. None of them reach into that void and fill the silence that follows the death of belief. And so Nietzsche warned, we are spiraling toward a crisis, not just of faith, but of the mind. A crisis that looks disturbingly familiar today. One of the greatest tragedies of Nietzsche's legacy is how misunderstood he became. People see God is dead and assume he was celebrating it. They think he was just another rebellious intellectual cheering the fall of religion. They imagine him as a cold nihilist telling the world, nothing matters, do what you want. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Nietzsche wasn't rejoicing. He was mourning. He didn't see the death of God as a triumph. He saw it as a crisis, a spiritual and moral earthquake. Because when belief collapses, it takes everything with it. For thousands of years, religion wasn't just a system of worship. It was the foundation of ethics, justice, compassion, and order. Even modern societies that call themselves secular still rest on moral structures built by religious thought. But once God is dead, those structures start to rot. And Nietzsche feared that people wouldn't be ready for that void. They wouldn't know how to rebuild. Instead, they'd cling to illusions, or worse, fall into nihilism, the belief that nothing matters at all. He predicted a world where people, desperate for meaning, would turn to politics, to ideology, to tribalism, and even to cruelty. And that's exactly what happened. His warnings were twisted by those who didn't understand him. Dictators, demagogues, and ideologues warped his words into weapons. The Nazis hijacked his idea of the Übermensch and used it to justify hate. But Nietzsche hated nationalism. He hated blind obedience. He hated the herd mentality. His philosophy wasn't about domination. It was about transformation. He wasn't saying, God is dead, now destroy. He was saying, God is dead, now create. Create your own values. Create your own meaning. Don't fall into despair. Don't let others define right and wrong. Become the author of your own soul. When Nietzsche said God is dead, he didn't mean people would stop worshiping. He meant they'd start worshiping the wrong things. Because humans are meaning-making creatures. We cannot live in a vacuum. We cannot face the abyss for long without trying to fill it. So what did we do? We replaced religion with consumerism. We worship brands. We measure worth in money and status. We drown in endless distraction, screens, noise, dopamine hits. Or we replace God with ideology. Politics became religion. Parties became tribes. People stopped thinking and started chanting. Others turned to pleasure, believing that if life has no meaning, then at least it can feel good. But the high never lasts. And when it fades, the emptiness grows deeper. Nietzsche saw this all coming. He warned that we'd create false gods, temporary comforts that cannot bear the weight of existence. And the proof is all around us. Depression is on the rise. Anxiety is epidemic. People are more connected and more alone than ever before. Why? Because we are still living in Nietzsche's prophecy, still pretending that meaning can be bought, elected, streamed, or consumed. But deep down, we know it's not enough. And Nietzsche knew the way out wouldn't be easy. He didn't believe in returning to old faiths or clinging to hollow rituals. He believed in rebuilding from the ground up. He envisioned a new kind of human, one strong enough to face the void and not flinch, one brave enough to create meaning where none was given, not a follower, not a victim, but a creator. When Nietzsche looked into the abyss, he didn't flinch. He stared into the darkness and asked, "What now? If God is dead, if meaning is gone, if morality has crumbled, what comes next?" His answer wasn't despair, it was transformation. Nietzsche introduced one of the most misunderstood ideas in philosophy, the Übermensch, or the Superman. Not a comic book hero, not a tyrant, but a person who dares to live without illusions. The Übermensch is the one who sees the world exactly as it is, chaotic, godless, indifferent, and does not run from it. They do not seek comfort in religion or ideology. They do not cling to the old values of a dying world. Instead, they create. They create new values, forged from their own struggle. They become their own moral authority. Their life is not a reaction. It is an act of will. Think of the greatest minds in history. Leonardo da Vinci, who fused art with science. Nikola Tesla, who saw electricity in everything. Frida Kahlo, who painted her pain into power. These weren't just people. They were creators of reality. This is what Nietzsche envisioned. Not obedience, not comfort, but a human being who writes their own code, who does not ask, "What should I believe?" but dares to ask, "What can I create?" And it's not about ego or dominance. It's about authenticity, about living a life that is truly yours, not borrowed, not inherited, not imposed. But here's the catch. The path to becoming the Übermensch is brutal. It requires facing your deepest fears. It demands the courage to destroy the old parts of yourself and rebuild from the ashes. Most people don't want that. They want comfort. They want rules. They want someone to tell them what life means. But Nietzsche's challenge was this: if you can't rely on God, then become something greater than you were. Not divine, not perfect, but awake. Because in a world where the gods have died, the only ones left to carry the torch are us. What drives you? Not your goals, not your job, not even your dreams. I'm talking about something deeper, something primal, something Nietzsche called the will to power. This is not about dominance over others. It's not about brute strength, political rule, or physical control. It's about something far more profound, the drive to overcome. For Nietzsche, every living being is pushed by a force, not to survive, not to reproduce, but to grow, to transcend, to assert its essence over chaos. The will to power is the desire to shape your own destiny, to climb higher even when the world tells you to stay low, to forge meaning even in the heart of meaninglessness. It's what separates those who drift from those who rise. Think about the last time you broke through a limit, physical, emotional, intellectual. The moment you faced fear and didn't run, the moment you created something new, when everyone doubted you. That wasn't luck. That was your will to power. But most people never tap into it. They wait. Wait for purpose to find them. Wait for someone to rescue them from the void. Wait for rules to be handed down, paths to be paved. Nietzsche's voice cuts through the silence. No one is coming. You must become. Every time you give in to fear, every time you follow the crowd, every time you abandon your potential for comfort, you are rejecting your will. You are suppressing your power. But the moment you decide, "I will no longer be shaped by the world, I will shape myself," that is the moment you awaken. The will to power isn't a philosophy. It's a fire, a rebellion, a birth. It means becoming the author of your life. No excuses, no borrowed beliefs, no secondhand values. Just you, raw, exposed, free, and terrifyingly responsible for who you choose to become. So here we are. The gods are gone. The old truths lie in ruins. The sacred scripts that once defined our place in the universe are now nothing but dust and memory. And you are standing at the edge of the abyss, looking down and wondering what's next. Nietzsche never promised it would be easy. He didn't offer comfort or salvation or step-by-step guides. He offered something far more terrifying and far more powerful: responsibility. In a world where God is dead, you are the author of your ethics, your truth, your purpose, your very existence. But that responsibility is not for everyone. Most people will retreat, cling to old beliefs, worship false gods, numb themselves with distraction, blame the system, blame fate, blame anyone but themselves. Because it's easier to be a follower than a creator. It's easier to fall into nihilism than to rise into transformation. But Nietzsche believed that a new kind of human could emerge, a human who sees the chaos, the meaninglessness, the death of all divine order, and still chooses to create, a human who doesn't beg for meaning, but builds it from the ground up. Every thought, every action, every struggle, a brick in the cathedral of their own soul. That is the true challenge. That is Nietzsche's final test. Will you let the void consume you, or will you step into it and carve your own path? This isn't just philosophy. This is a call to action. Because at some point, whether in a crisis, a tragedy, or a quiet moment of reflection, you will be forced to confront the question: if life has no inherent meaning, then what will you make of it? There is no divine plan waiting for you, no pre-written destiny, only the terrifying, exhilarating freedom to define your own. So now, the choice is yours. Will you fall into the abyss, or will you become the one who rises above it?